teaching business English. We're going to look into the concepts. We will also do some practice activities and I'll answer any questions. Just to refresh and to remind you, you have probably received an email. Please let me know with additional material for TBE. Did you guys get this email with the additional material with the manual?
Not me.
Not you? Okay, then. So I will check with Dr. Siavac after the class because there is additional material. And of course, the material that is available on your Canvas. Have any of you already found this material in Canvas, the TBE? Not yet? Okay, so TBE is Teaching Business English.
Teaching Business English is in Module 8, and it's open for everyone. They can view that. Like you need to go through Module 6 and 7, and then the last one is Module 8. You'll see it over there. If by any chance you won't see it, some people have emailed Simon saying they can't access it. It's usually because you haven't fully logged in, because you could see some of your modules and some of the materials without logging in. But if you really want to see all your exams and quizzes and some of the locked modules, like TBE is locked for the public, but is open for our students. So you need to log in to see that. Make sure you're logged in. Thank you.
Thank you.
Indeed, yesterday that happened to me. I just entered Canvas and then I sent a message to Dr. Siavash. I can't see it. He said, please log in. And that was it. As soon as I logged in, I was able to see it. But I will walk you through that as well in Canvas. Okay, before we get started, what do you understand is business English? So when we say teaching business English, what kind of content would you be teaching? Any suggestions? Any ideas? Would you be teaching history maybe? Would it be part of business English? Or do you think that
No.
business English? No? Okay. And why not?
I would say when it comes to business English, what comes to my mind is, I don't know, for making sales phone calls or giving presentations, or I don't know, reading and writing documents in English, with job interviews, or for just specific purposes.
Exactly. But let's suppose you're going to make a presentation in history. Would that be then a business English class? Prepare a presentation in history with history content?
Can be.
Yes, that's it. So we have a misconcept, I think. So the course outline, you have this part, week 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, writing in other disciplines. So teaching business English is writing, basically writing. That's what we consider first, the first module that we're going to, the first week, in other disciplines. So that means, what's a discipline? So a discipline is, an academic discipline is called a field or area of study. So as I said, it can be literature, it can be history, it can be environment. So anytime that we're using a discipline with a business purpose, so prepare a presentation, to do a job interview, because all of this, you can be a teacher, a history teacher, and you're going for a job interview. So that's business English, right? So we do have a misconcept. So now that I think that we have cleared this up, some of them are more commonly known, but with the new professions arising lately, for instance, in IT area, there are so many new professions coming up, such as you have now cloud computing experts, something that 5 years ago we would never think of, and other professions as well. So we have to be prepared to teach a variety of topics in business English nowadays. We have to open up and be ready for that. So many colleges, we know that they have those basic ones, right? Math, biology, economics, and or history, and so on. But also we have to be prepared for specifics, such as, can you imagine a student who has to make a Russian history presentation or a French literature presentation? So as an English teachers, we're not specialists in this area, but if you know the concepts of teaching business English, how to tackle the concept of teaching business English, you will apply this concept regardless the area. And then you will have to look into the specific vocabulary that the student will need to use. So there is the big concept of teaching business English, regardless the field or the area. And then there is specific vocabulary for you to teach. Are we good to go up to now? Okay. Now, why does this matter? Well, it matters because, once again, to eliminate the misconcept that we have and to also prepare you in a wide scope as a teacher. You will be able to work in any area. So an English teacher, that's what I love about teaching English. You learn as you teach. So if you're going to help a dentist, the dentist needs to, if nowadays there is the test that is OET. So OET, it's Occupational English Test. So the OET, it is specifically for those in healthcare, pharmacy, nurse, doctors, physiotherapists, but they each have a specific test within the OET. OET has been growing, and it's many students, instead of taking IELTS, are taking now OET because the specific vocabulary of their field, they really know. So they just need to adapt that with some strategies, and they will pass the test easier than if they're learning IELTS, preparing for IELTS. So that's something for you guys to look into. Take notes. OET, then it's a growing field. Now, here, what will make a text different from another? So let's, before looking into concepts, what would you say would differ in a text of dentistry or a text of history? What would be the major differences?
Specialized terms.
Excellent. Okay. What else would differ? Would there be a major difference besides the specific vocabulary and terms, jargons? The format as well. So there are several types of genres that we're going to look into. So you can have an academic text, you can have an essay, you can have an oral text. So this changes the format of the text, even within the same field. So if you're going to make an oral presentation, will you necessarily use the same language as if you would write the same content? Or would you
No,
use slightly different vocabulary?
different vocabulary.
And the tone, would the tone be the same?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. There you go. What do you understand by tone? So what is the tone of a text? I'll give you an example that I think it's a little bit more, I love examples because I feel that they're, so if I said, could you call me? So if I said, could you call me? Then later. Would you please? 3 p.m. Would you kindly me? So there are 3 sentences with basically the same message, the same idea. If we were to scale it into the least formal to the most formal, what would be the least formal?
The first one.
There you go. Because we have could, which is a modal verb that is polite. but it is slightly informal. Would you please call me? I missed to hear the would. So would you please call me after 3 p.m.? So, and would you kindly contact me? What is the difference between these two? Can you see it? Can you feel the difference, or are they the same?
So contact, I think, is more formal than call.
Exactly. So would you kindly contact me? It is more formal. So in a scale here, it's 1, 2, 3, right? So this is tone. Whom are you speaking to? Let's suppose you're leaving a message for your supervisor to call you back. Which one would you use? 1, 2, or 3?
3.
You would use 1, Hussein?
3. The last
3
one.
you would use, okay. And if you're leaving a message, let's suppose, for me, your teacher, which one would you use?
Yeah, I use again the last one.
You would use the last one. Do you feel that the first one would be rude, or it's just not the right tone to talk to your teacher?
Yeah, the latter. It's not right the right tone.
That's it. It's not that it's rude, it's just not the right tone, right? So you're you have to adjust the tone according to whom you're speaking. So if your audience, you're going to make a presentation, and your audience, it's a conference, and your audience, they are there as the same category, accountants, let's suppose. So you are an accountant and you're making a presentation to other accountants. What would be the tone that you would use then? The first, the second, the third tone. Where would you kind of like adjust your speech? I would love to hear suggestions. You guys can send it in the chat box if you can't open up your microphone. So what would you use? You're an accountant and you're making a presentation with updates of new IR, IR updates. So it's like a very technical presentation that you're, informing the other accountants. You would use still 3. Okay. Why would you use 3, Hussein?
I don't know. I think the tone of the presentation should be formal.
Principally because you're informing, right? You are kind of like the specialist and you are informing, you are bringing updated data and information. Okay, we're going to go to a workshop, let's suppose, and it's a teacher training workshop. And there's one teacher who's going to conduct the training for you guys to teach and develop oral activities in the classroom. So strategies for oral activity. The presenter, what tone would the presenter use in this case? It's a workshop. Everyone is going to develop activities together and you're preparing to apply these strategies in the classroom. What would be the tone then? 2. Now, when you talk to your students in class and you're asking them, okay, so let's get organized, guys. Let's go find a pair. There you go. That's it. So in this case, the workshop, the teacher leading the workshop is going to kind of simulate what you would be doing in the classroom. So then there will be a change of tone 1 and tone 2, maybe. So tone 2, the teacher addressing the other teachers participating. And then when the instructions will be given, it's going to be the first one, a polite but informal tone. If you speak too formally to your students when you're conducting oral activities, what can happen? Do you think the students will feel more comfortable with a polite and informal tone when you're trying to get them, to involve them in your oral activity compared to
It's
a formal
confusing.
tone? Sorry,
It's a little
Jose?
bit it's confusing. I think it's another burden on the shoulder of the students. So why using formal language?
Exactly. Excellent. So you see how, as teachers, we really have to adjust according to the activity that we're going to propose, the response that we expect. So now we're in a class and we're teaching our student how to write a cover letter for his resume. What is the tone that you're going to conduct this class to teach your student to write, not the cover letter, the tone that you're going to use to conduct the class? So you're going to say, okay, so the formal letter, there are some elements that have to be included in the formal letter. You have to be sure that you do not include information that is already included in your resume. So the cover letter is for additional information that is not included in your resume. What tone am I using right now? I'm talking to my students. Tone 1, excellent. That's it. Now, what about the tone in the cover letter? What is the tone that the student will have to write in? There you go, excellent. Very formal and, precise. Excellent. So now moving on. So as I said, there is discipline and the tone. The tone so that's something, it's not really in the literature exactly the tone. We know that there are different tones, but exactly how to blend these tones, it goes according to your group, it goes according to what you're teaching and to the response that you expect. So that's why we say that the teacher's position, many teachers, when online teaching started and these platforms that they have automated answers and the student can do a self-study, were concerned that the teacher's role would suddenly kind of like disappear. But can you see how the teacher's role still is crucial in order to have this uh, distinction? So the teacher's role we will never lose. What we will is increase our scope of teaching now online, blended learning, face to face. Just so the first example here, I'm going to give you guys a few minutes and I would like you to read this example and then I'm going to ask a couple of questions. Okay, so I'll give you guys 2 little minutes. I'm going to time you. I think it's enough. And then I'll ask you guys the questions. Here we go. Okay, so what field could this text be? Could it be, for example, law? What would be the field that you would maybe define in this text? Okay, history. That's it. That's a possibility, definitely. Now, we're going to go to the next one. But before that, I'd like you to tell me, can you identify any elements of formal or informal in the text? Can you identify elements that you can say, no, this is informal or this is formal? For example, in the second sentence, when he says, he does make much of the fact that the Union flag was not lowered. There is an affirmative sentence using does. He does make much. Would this be formal or informal? To emphasize, right? There you go. Excellent. When we see here, points out, phrasal verb, would you say that phrasal verbs are more informal or more formal?
Formal.
There you go. That's it. So we can see that the text, even though it's history, it still can be informal. Where would you find this text maybe? In which kind of, would it be a post, maybe online? Could it be a publication? Can it be published? Where would this text be maybe? An article? Okay, it can be in an article. Now, would it be like a journal or would it be maybe an article on a blog, an article in, a teacher has posted because he has written comments from the class? Would you find this in a journal, in one of those, high rated journals? There you go. That's it. Perhaps on a blog, or nowadays the teachers we all use Teams to register and to log what was discussed in class and the topics. So this could be like something very informal that the teacher has just taken notes. Okay, let's go. Now I'd like you to read this one. I think 2 minutes has been too much time. Maybe I can reduce that a little bit. What do you guys say? Can I reduce it like to 1 minute? Better two. We'll keep it at two then, no problem. I'll have questions that may be the same, but also additional and different questions. So here we go. Okay, what is the field of this text? What would you say is the field? Literature, excellent. And what is the tone that you see here? Can you identify any elements that can define the tone? Exactly, it's very formal, but what elements in the sentences show you this level of formal? The first element, there you go. Okay, in personal language, excellent. Now, Hussein, what exactly, can you show me a sentence or an example of impersonal language?
The poet, the former.
Okay, so is considered, this is a passive structure. Okay, passive structures, they are known to be impersonal and formal because there isn't, the writer is not involved, so there is no personal element there. So whenever you see a text that has, and you will see that academic writing for publishing, it has to have this passive structure. It's one of the most common structures. And then you have vocabulary like the former, multiple
Question.
meanings. There you go. So we have a lot of vocabulary that. What about the use of pronouns? Can you identify the use of pronouns? So the use of pronouns also is a sign of formality. It avoids repetition. The text will flow more naturally. Here we go. One more. So this is the last one. I'd like you to read because now we're going to have a few questions to. Okay, the field here. What would you say is the field? Medical science, okay. Could you try to maybe narrow it down? Would it maybe be like, I don't know, biology, something in the area? Okay, excellent. Now, I'd like you to observe the punctuation. So this, if you look at the first sentence is a very long sentence. It has 3 lines and a little bit more. Would you say that there is that punctuation is missing here, or there are words that substituted the punctuation? The parentheses, that's it. So when you add parentheses, that's one way of eliminating commas. Perfect. When we look in the rat, comma, what kind of phrase is this? When we have this in the rat, comma, why do we have to have this comma here after in the rat? It is a prepositional phrase, but at this moment, it's what we call an introductory phrase, because not always a prepositional phrase will have a comma. But in this case, it is an introductory phrase, so the reader knows where. Introductory phrases are when you inform the reader time, place, and it's short phrases and at the beginning of the sentences. So that's why it's called an introductory phrase. It's informing the reader a place, a time. The tone is very formal, right? Now, if you were to teach this lesson, what and how would you prepare as a teacher to teach a student? The student comes to you with this text saying that he has to prepare to do an oral presentation in a conference. How would you approach to prepare this class?
I would say I'm so busy, please refer to another teacher.
Okay, no, you wouldn't do that. Let's go. Because now I'm going to teach you some strategies for you to work with any topic. Remember at the beginning of the class that I said there are strategies that regardless the content, you will be able to teach. And we're going to talk right now. So even if you don't really understand, we know that there are basic differences. So here, for example, there are quotations. So that, how do we know that there are quotations here? The quotation marks, right? They tell us that we have double quotation marks. These are. In the second one, it's specialized vocabulary, literary devices, themes, poems. So there are lots of words that signal that this is about literature. And here, what is interesting, you will, maybe you did not really identify that, but the sentences, they're made up of multisyllabic nouns, some forms of the verb to be, that means passive. So, although there may be many differences, we're going to now help you prepare classes that regardless, and it's all about note taking. In order for you to prepare a class, you have to learn how to take notes, identify the elements that you need to study, and this will also help you, teacher, student, how to read a text and prepare a presentation. Because a presentation, it is based on key information. So you as a teacher, you will do note taking. So we're going to go now a little bit, I'm going to take a break here from the slide, and we're going to go to our website because you're going to need this information. So I'm going to give you guys the link, and I'm going to ask you to log on to the link because we will need the information to do the next activity. So this is the website for you to log in. Remember, you have to log in. You should land here, and then you will select the courses, the modules. In the modules, you will find TBE, note taking, and annotating. Just give me an okay when you have reached this point and you're ready for us to start to work the activity.
Is that the page on course description?
Yeah, so here you will go, in order for you to find this here, you will come to modules, okay? So you select modules, and then you go all the way down to module 8. 3, 4, 5, 6, 8. Here, 6. Here, module 8. And you will select TBE, note taking. Is everybody okay there? Okay. So when we talk about note taking, there are 6 principles that we have to observe. So you as a teacher, you will need note taking in order to prepare the class. And then you will have to teach your student note taking for him to be able, or her, to be able to select the content in order to make a presentation or to write an article once again. Regardless the goal, note taking is the key to preparing any kind of business class. The first thing you need to have is to identify, is to determine what you need. So if it's on paper based, you can highlight, underline, you can use those, the post-its. Now, if it's online, you also have those resources in PDF where you can highlight. Now, remember that if you highlight too much, it will become very polluted. So you have to teach your student what he has to take notes of. Main ideas. How do we identify main ideas? Nouns and verbs in particular. So usually nouns and noun phrases, these are main ideas and main concepts. Rarely will you find an adjective as a main concept. So nouns and verbs are the focus to identify main ideas in your text. We always start by reading the first paragraph. Now, the first paragraph is what we call the introductory paragraph. And we know that the introductory paragraph is going to inform the main topic, and then each paragraph that will follow will develop one main idea that connects back to the main topic. So that is also, so each paragraph will have one main idea that will connect back to the main topic. So we know that you can almost do kind of like a mind map. You have a main topic, and then you will several paragraphs, and from each one, it will stem from the main topic. You're going to read over all your highlighted areas then, once you have read the text and you have identified the main topic, main ideas. The next step is to read, and you're going to write a short summary of that. Why are we going to do a summary? Because we're going to reduce the amount of information that we have to work on. So sometimes a text can have 10, 12 paragraphs. So we're going to reduce that. So it would be 200 sentences. You're going to reduce it to like around 20 sentences because you have main topic and main ideas. It will be much easier for you to prepare and do research to be prepared for specific topics. Besides that, you're going to find any other important ideas in the reading. So why are repeated words and phrases important? Because every time you have repeated words, let's suppose if we're talking about education. Education is a word that education. So if you see a word that is repeated several times, we know that it's a main idea, main topic. Every time that you see the word in the text, an idea will most likely stem from it. So that's why identifying repeated words is where it can also help you identify main ideas. Now, once again, this takes a little bit of practice for you to learn how to do it and also to teach your student, because students tend to want to highlight too much information. They want to highlight details, adjectives, adverbs that really are not relevant to the main idea. Always be sure to have the bibliographic details whenever you're going to use any kind of material, or if the student has provided the material to you saying that he needs that, always ask for bibliographic details. This can be definitely helpful because you will see the publisher, the publication. So if it's a blog, if it's published on a blog, we've already discussed the tone will be different. If it's been published in a journal, once again. So these are the 6 major steps, the concepts that you will use to prepare TBE classes. And you will use these concepts also to teach your student to identify information, to build his presentation, to write his article, to study for a test. So now there is a reading passage about fiction. Now, we're going to go back to these 6 concepts. So just hang on to them there. What do you understand as fiction? What is fiction? You can use the microphone to answer or the chat box, whatever is better for you. Okay, Mosh, a true account. Fiction. Is it a true account fiction?
No, the opposite. The stories about imaginary people or events.
Yeah, so fiction is something that is unreal, let's suppose. It's imaginary. It doesn't really have to be based on anything factual, right? Now, why do we read fiction? why should we read fiction? I know that here there's an explanation and so on, but in your mindset, why is reading fiction beneficial? Okay, we are so busy nowadays preparing classes and studying for postgraduate that our reading, the reading that we usually do, is so focused and oriented. We start to lose the ability of being creative, of thinking outside the box, because we're so, we're so task purposed. When we start to read fiction, this is when we start to see and to imagine, because fiction requires from us to be a participant. You have to imagine, you have to elaborate, you have to close your eyes and imagine a context. So this will juggle a little bit more your creativity. And when you start to read even those academic texts and the more task oriented, you will be able to read these readings of this material to its full potential without being so task oriented, observing the inferred meaning in those academic texts. So that's why fiction is going to trigger and juggle that creativity that is kind of like dormant when we're so task oriented and career oriented. So now there's an article, and I have separated. We're going to read the introductory paragraph together. So I'd like a volunteer to read this paragraph out loud, please. Okay, thank you. Who's a volunteer here? It's really important that you do this because we ask our students, there we go, Mosh, to learn new words, to broaden your imagination. Excellent. Very well. I'm sorry, I missed your comment, but it's 100% within the scope of reading fiction. We frequently ask our students to read out loud, don't we? So once there was a teacher-parent meeting, and as the parents arrived, they entered the classroom and they all sat at the back. So the first, desks, they were all empty. And then I said, okay, I was wondering. And then I asked the parents who were there, good evening, good evening. Now I asked them, where would you like your students to sit, your children to sit in the classroom? And everybody, at the front, at the front. Then I said, curiously, why are you all seated at the back then? Right? So we putting ourselves in what we ask our students to do is very helpful. So I'd like a volunteer to read this first paragraph, please.
Okay, I'll read.
Ah, wonderful. I'm so happy. There you go. Please.
Your brain on fiction. With all the noise from our digital devices, the old-fashioned value of reading novels can seem useless. However, new support for the value of fiction comes from an unexpected field, brain science, also called neuroscience.
Okay, so this is our introductory paragraph. What, according to what is in this paragraph, what is the main topic of this reading, do you believe? We have a title that is already a guideline, right? And then the information. Would you say that noise from our digital devices, is this something important to take note? Old-fashioned value of reading novels. However, new support for the value of fiction. New support for the value of fiction comes from an unexpected field, brain science, also called neuroscience. The first sentence, only after however, is really worth taking notes. But what exactly would you take notes here? So would you take notes, let's suppose, of value of fiction, right?
Mhm.
And then comes from an unexpected field. This is a very long sentence. Is there maybe a paraphrase or a paraphrase for this big comes from an unexpected field? Originates from brain science and neuroscience. So suddenly, a big sentence like this, we can really, narrow it down to the value of fiction originates from brain science, equivalent to neuroscience. So when you're going to prepare this class now, what would you kind of like look up and become a little bit more familiar? Of all of this,
Neuroscience.
neuroscience, that's it. Because all the rest, it is important, but it's not core for you to be prepared to teach. You're not going to have to teach the student about neuroscience, but you have to be a little bit familiar with neuroscience and its function, because after all, it shows the value of fiction. So I'd like you now, you're going to read the second paragraph, but the third paragraph is where you're going to take notes. What would be the words that you would, or the phrases that you would take notes to prepare the class and to show the core idea? Remember, we know that it's neuroscience now, and each paragraph will develop an idea that will be connected, that will refer back to the main topic somehow. So I'm going to give you guys 3 little minutes for you to read and try to identify the keywords that you need in order to prepare this class. Okay, here we go. So in the third paragraph, what are the key ideas that we need to highlight here? You can either say it in your microphone or type it in the chat box. Dorothy, Mosh, any ideas here? Hussein? We can add, so some of you can say some words.
Scientists have recently discovered.
Okay, so what about here the fact that certain parts of brain involved in our understanding of written words? Is any of this important?
Yeah, certain parts
Yes.
of the brain involved now, Sani.
They're parts of the brain, right? And it's connected to understanding of new words, okay? And then you have scientists have recently discovered. So we don't really need the fact of scientists. What did they discover? That's what we need.
It's activation of different
Yeah.
parts of the brain.
There you go. Okay. And then any other important vocabulary
And then I
here?
think two examples of these areas, language processing area and smell processing area.
There we go. And respond, right?
Yes, smell process, smell also.
Response here. Okay. So now you're going to prepare this class. What are you going to look for in this paragraph? Do you need to really do any research, or it's just to identify, highlight, and how does this connect to neuroscience, which is the main topic here?
So because neuroscience is something to do with the brain, so that it talks about the activation of different parts of the brain, so they are connected.
There we go. That's exactly it. So we have here a connection of neuroscience and brain. And then brain is connected here to understanding, which is then explaining why stories. You can see here that the word stories is kind of like a paraphrase for fiction, so that we don't repeat too many times. And then the effect of this. What is the effect? The language processing and respond. So you can see that there is a point, it will explain, and then there is an effect. That is also a very common structure of a paragraph. Present the point, explain your point, and then show the effect, the result of this point. This is very typical structure in academic writing, in particular in more technical articles. Now, if we go back to the list, so I'd like you guys now, we're going to work together. You're going to take, hopefully you have your mobile there, or you can do a print screen. I'd like you to take a picture of this because we're going to go back to those 6 elements. Okay, I have taken my picture and we're going to go back now. So when you were marking your words, did you use any of these strategies? 1, 2, 3, 5, probably not. 6, neither. But from 1, 2, 3, 4, did you use any of these strategies?
Yes, we did the last one, number 4. The highlight keywords,
Repeated words, okay, excellent. We use the second one too, right? When we identified the main topic, when we read the introductory, right? Okay. Did you guys take notes? I used the underlining, right? I did the underlining because I have the screen, the control of the screen. So we also used number 1, right? If you took notes, that's also number 1 because it can be note taking. And number 4, find any other important areas. We did number 3, sorry. Have we done already number 3? No, right? So now I'd like you to go back to your highlighted words that we just did and see if you can come up with like a sentence, putting together the main elements that you highlighted.
Like reading fiction can activate a few parts of the brain, including language processing area and smell processing area.
Language processing and
Smell processing area, where we process smell.
so
The
but
last
the
time.
smell is kind of like an example, right? Only of perfume and skunks. The concept here is the response. So it's the language processing area of our brains response of how our brains are activated or they're triggered, right?
Yes.
That's a very good sentence there, Hussein. If any of you have also a sentence that you have written and you could share in the chat box, that would be very nice because we're going to use this information then. So I would possibly, if everyone can type in the chat box, your sentence that you put together.
They're already in the chat box.
Yeah,
Marsh
I'm
and
looking
Dorothy.
here. So for example, we can see it's like bits and parts. Can you make a full sentence? So like Hussein did. So parts of the brain are connected to understanding of written words. However, Hussein, he inverted the structure. He said, while reading fiction, right? So he started from the middle and he kind of like inverted the structure. So while reading fiction, many parts of the brain are activated to understand the message, such as language processing and response. So we can see that regardless the way that you take notes, all the messages in the chat box, they have vocabulary that is very similar. So note taking, if you follow these steps, you're going to land and identify the vocabulary that you need to make it, to prepare the class and to teach your student how to identify information, to be able to prepare a presentation, write an article, take a test. Okay, so that's the main idea here. The note taking, it becomes kind of like a standard way for the student to identify, and you, the teacher, also identify. I changed here, hold on. Identify the core ideas. So let's come back here to our presentation. So then we have understanding fiction, and these are parts. Okay, so now in this paragraph, in a 2016 study, what would be the keywords that you would highlight here? So let's try to do it as you read. Tell me or write in the chat box, what are the keywords here that you would highlight? Okay, strong older, there we go. And neutral words. The brain was scanned, right? Their brains were scanned. Excellent, that's it, brain scanned. Let me just highlight here. Okay, FMR machine. For sensing smells, okay. So vocabulary for sensing smells. The brains light up. And words without sensing smells, the brain is dark, the region is dark. Okay, so now based on these words, can you make a sentence of this information? I would like you to type this sentence in the chat box, please. An experiment by the Spanish showed that human brains respond differently to stronger and neutral words. Okay, the key idea that we have here, let's see, once again. So I don't think that it's really important, the fact of researchers in Spain. If we use the word, for example, subjects, we know right away that these are people participating in a research or even participants. Okay, so we really don't need to take notes of so much information. So subjects or participants, read words with odor, with strong odor. Association, strong odor. Association. Which lit up a specific area in the brain, right? So now look how the which here, which lit up a specific area in the brain. The other information that the area stayed dark, is it really crucial for us to take notes of it, or the fact that it lights up when it reads words with strong odor is our key information here? So Dorothy, that human's brain respond differently. Odor and neutral words. Two different reactions of brain being lit up and staying dark when reading words with different association. Okay, Hussein, don't you think it's worthwhile saying what kind of association, right? It could be color association. Here it's odor. Odor is important, right?
Yes.
Exactly. Okay, so as you can see, manipulating language is also then going to be helpful, because as the student is trying to summarize, he will retrieve all of his language skills, relative pronouns, punctuation. So that's why we should encourage them and not skip this step. We may find it unnecessary, but it's the output of language. So they learn complex sentences, they learn relative pronouns, and this is the moment for the output, when they have to really apply relative pronouns, prepositions, conjunctions, pronouns to refer back. So it's full sentences that you're going to encourage them to write. So now, to wrap up our there is still irony. Irony is something very interesting, and that has become a major trend because of the online posts and those memes and all those little cartoons. So if you read those cartoons, of Hagar or Calvin, you will see that the language that is used has a lot of irony. So identifying this is also important, because the words used are very common words, but what will change is the structure of the sentence and the context. So, for example, an exclamation mark, or simply an inversion of words. This will all make a difference for the text to be carried with irony. Now, you have verbal irony, when a word's intended, they have different meaning from the actual word. So, for example, imagine it's a very stormy day and the character says, "What beautiful weather." Of course, he means this is verbal irony. Now, situational irony is when a situation ends differently from expected, or what would be normal. So, for example, in The Gift of Maggie, a short story by O. Henry, the husband and wife each sell a prized possession to buy the other a gift. So the husband sells his watch to buy his wife some beautiful hair combs, and the wife cuts and sells her hair to buy her husband a watch chain. So this is very ironic, right? Because the gifts that they bought each other is in fact useless now. So this is, so you also have to be prepared for this. We don't usually really use this for business English, but we can use it to include in our teaching lessons when we want to express original language, authentic language. So irony is a very good way of showing your students what is authentic language and how, if you try to translate literally, you will not get the meaning, because not only the words have meaning, but also the context. Okay? All of this information is there in your website. I will, once again, last class, I wasn't able to copy all of the emails before the light went off. So please, if you could repeat your emails in the chat box. Was saying I have, but because I have already sent, but the other students, for example, Mosh, I don't have your email. So I can email this presentation, and I'll also email the additional information that you should have received about your board exam, of the additional study material. I'll also include that in your email. Okay. Thank you for those emails. Now, before we go, are there any questions or comments that you would like, questions to ask or comments regarding this topic?
No, thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining me. You can expect an email. Dr. Siavash would said that he would also forward something for you guys about a class that is not going to be neither on Saturday nor on Monday, about MOOC, if I'm not mistaken, right? So keep an eye out there for your emails. Okay? Thank you so much for joining me. Have a wonderful day or afternoon or evening, depending where you are.
You as well. Bye.
Bye.